Hi, this is Kat Tillinghast with West Coast Yoga and Sports Therapy. I'm a yoga therapist and I help people with chronic pain and other imbalances. And today we're going to talk about some yoga poses we can do for low back and hips and knees. And I'm just starting on my back and hugging my knees into my chest to give my low back a light stretch. Maybe rocking from side to side to give myself a little massage on the spine. And then I'm just going to go ahead and straighten one leg up to the ceiling. And the important thing to remember here is that your low back and your shoulders should be on the mat. I'm going to take a hamstring stretch, but it's really important that people listen to their own body and not try to bring the leg in. Maybe as far as me, but possibly some people can come even further. But it's nice to get a hamstring stretch, a soft hamstring stretch. And then we go into strengthening the abdominals. Really want to pull the navel into the spine. And here I'm going to keep my low back on the mat and just roll up and maybe count to 12. And hug the knee into the chest again. And then I'm going to switch sides. It's always important to do both sides evenly. And again, straighten the leg up with the fingers interlaced behind the knee, trying to keep the shoulders on the mat, stretching the hamstrings, but again, not overstretching. It's a very light stretch. The body's not exactly warm, but just releasing some pressure in the backs of the legs. And then a little abdominal strengthener is very good for the low back. And keeping the navel into the spine, and maybe just little pulses up for 12 on each side, and then rolling down and hugging the other knee in. And again, it's always important to do both sides so that you have balance. A lot of times we have weakness in the low back due to weak gluteal muscles. And our rear ends get very sort of soft and cushy from mostly sitting. So a good way to strengthen the glutes, which helps to strengthen the low back as well as the hips and the knees, is this exercise with the feet, toes pointed up and heels down. And the knees and feet are about hip distance apart. And then as we lift the hips and lower down, we're going to move with breath. So really inhaling up and exhaling and lowering down, rolling down. Keeping the feet flexed, toes pointed up, heels down, so you can get into those gluteal muscles. Remember to keep the chin away from the chest so that the back of the neck is long. And we're strengthening the low back and the gluteal muscles. And it's important to know that the hips and the knees and the low back are really cousins. They're all interrelated. And so generally, when we have a weakness in one of those areas, we feel pain possibly in the other part of the body. And I like to do about a set of 12, 6 to 12. And then again, hugging the knee into the chest to get that soft low back stretch, keeping the shoulders down, maybe releasing a little pressure in the foot by making circles around the ankle joint. Creating circles with the foot to get into the ankle joints and just release some pressure. Always nice to get a little movement in our joints so that we can create some fluid that warms and heats the joint. And then here we can go ahead and hug both knees into the chest because we've sort of really opened and strengthened our low back. And maybe bring the upper body up toward the knees, strengthen the abs, and then rock from side to side. Massaging the spine. And rolling to one side. So we're going to set up for clams. You want to make sure that your hips are stacked, your shoulders are stacked, your knees are stacked, and your toes are going to stay together while you lift the top knee, and make sure to breathe and hold the belly in tight. So you're going to firm your navel to your spine so that you will not rock back and forth. You want to keep your body in one place so we can really work on the muscles that we're working on, which are hips, low back. Clams are very good strengtheners. It's just very important that you stay in alignment so we can isolate the muscle groups that we're working on. Front and back and sides of hips. You do about 12 on each side. And then we're going to stretch. We call this thread the needle, making sure the low back is down, crossing the top foot above the other knee, and the foot stays flexed. The foot on top stays flexed to protect the knee. And again, you're controlling this stretch, so these are soft stretches. And we'll do the other side. Again, always doing both sides. Even, balanced body. Even, balanced strength. And really paying attention to the breath here. So very long, slow, smooth breaths. And again, firming the navel to the spine. Try to keep the shoulders stacked. I like to support myself with that right hand so that I don't roll forward or back. So you really have to be mindful of what you're doing in this simple pose that actually has a lot more complications than we realize. So we want to isolate the muscles, the front and the back and the sides of our hip. And this strengthens the low back. And then you want to make sure and stretch the hip that you just worked. So here you can see I'm crossing the right foot on top, hugging the left knee in, allowing for that right hip to get a stretch, shoulders dropping down. And then go ahead and hug both knees into your chest. Maybe a little roll. We like to call these rowing the boat. Keeping the toes together, making big circles with the knees in both directions. Again, strengthening the hips and the low back. Deep breaths, very deep breaths. And then hug the knees in. Bring your feet to the floor. Nice to get a low back stretch, and we're actually stretching the glutes as well. And I like to rock a little bit backward and forward, again strengthening the abs. Rocking backward and forward, massaging the spine. And then coming all the way up to standing. I come to the front of my mat. I'm going to step my left leg back, just about one of my legs distance, and just swivel my hips out to the side. So my hips are lining up with the left side of my mat, coming into Warrior Two, bending the front knee. That knee is going to stack directly over the ankle. So again, we're always in alignment. And the back toes are turned in. And this is really a dynamic pose. We're moving in and out of the pose. And you might have guessed that we're strengthening our knees. Checking that the knee stacks over the ankle. And I inhale as I come forward into Warrior Two. And exhale as I release, and keeping that straight leg with a soft knee, not hyperextending in that standing leg. And then I might hold it for 3 to 6 breaths. So again, 6 to 12 cycles on each side, and then holding it for 3 breaths, maybe 6 breaths. And then we're going to come into Trikonasana. Triangle pose. So in triangle pose, we want to stack our shoulders, make sure that the right hand is coming down above or below the right knee. Take a few breaths, come back to Warrior Two, and straighten the leg, bring the hips forward, and do the other side. So my left foot is out 90 degrees. I'm going to stack that stack the left knee over the ankle. And again, we're doing dynamic, breathing and moving. And of course, that movement and breath turns on the body's healing systems. and moving in and out of a pose is going to bring that flow of fluid to the joint. It's called synovial fluid. Heats and warms our joints. Always checking in with the front knee. Now we'll do the same thing as we did on the other side. Holding warrior two for a couple of breaths, checking that back arm, just checking in. Alignment, straightening the leg, lengthening, reaching out over the side, and placing the hand above or below the knee. It's important that the hand is not on the knee joint. Stacking your shoulders and looking up if you can. So if it hurts your neck, you can look down. It's okay to do that. And we don't need to bring our hands to the floor. We want to have our body in one straight line, as if our back were up against the wall. That's triangle. And then we're coming back to warrior two. And just checking in, bringing the hands to the heart. Checking in with the breath. How the body feels. And then stepping the feet together, and I'm going to come back to the mat, back to the floor. I'm going to set up here for some child's poses, which are really good for the low back, really the whole back. But it's a very important exercise for the hips. Your big toes are together. Knees can be apart. I'm just bringing the forehead toward the mat. And again, dynamically moving in and out of the pose is going to create strength in the hips and the low back, and really lengthen the whole back and take some pressure off the shoulders. Inhaling to rise up, and then as we exhale, we press back. And coming back up. I'm going to interlace my fingers and make a V shape with my forearms. And here we're going to strengthen the glutes. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to keep my hips level, and I'm lifting that right leg, keeping the right foot flexed, and I'm actually tensing and squeezing the right buttock as I lift. So I might inhale and sweep the knee down, and exhale, lift and squeeze the gluteal muscles. And we're going to do 6 to 12 on each side. If you have serious hip problems, see if you can do a lot more than that. Just try to keep it strong, linked with breath. And again, in alignment, so shoulders are over the elbows, and pressing back to child's pose to stretch. Maybe rising up and pressing back. Inhaling and exhaling. Really firming the belly muscles in as you press back. Okay. And always press yourself up nicely. I'm going to start moving into a low lunge sequence, which is going to stretch the low back. And again, hamstrings, but really don't have to straighten the leg. And I'm inhaling as I come forward, lifting my heart. Exhaling as I press back. It's okay to bring the knee forward a little bit more than when we're in standing poses, as there's no weight on the knee. And then I'm going to come up into a low lunge and sink forward. And here I'm going to start firming the right gluteal muscles again. I'm going to make sure my hips and my shoulders are stacked. So shoulders are directly over the hips, and I'm going to sink forward a little bit so I get a stretch in the front of the left thigh. But I'm squeezing and tensing this right buttock while I'm breathing. And holding that. And then as I release that, relax the right buttock, I'm going to give a little stretch to the frontal left hip by grabbing hold of my left wrist and just reaching up and over to the right side, and really get length on the left side of the body rather than just tilting over to the side. Try to lengthen. And then I'm going to come forward and frame the foot, and it's really nice to be in a little bit of a twist to release pressure, but mainly what I'm doing here is stretching that frontal left hip again, really the psoas muscle, getting into that tight hip flexor area, as that controls tension in the low back. And again, stretching where it's safe for your body to stretch, never going past your limits, and making sure to do the other side evenly, again with breath, not overstretching that hamstring on the left side. Taking deep breaths, reaching the heart forward as I inhale. And again, I like to say 6, maybe 12 sets on each side. And again, I'm coming up and stacking my shoulders over my hips, and I'm tensing the right buttock. This is really going to stretch that psoas muscle as I'm sinking forward and stretching it and strengthening. Really helps with all types of hip pain. And again, as we strengthen the hips, we strengthen the low back and the knees. And then I'm going to reach the arms up as I inhale and grab hold of my right wrist this time, reaching up and over to the left side as I'm sinking forward with my hips and stretching the right side. And framing the left foot and reaching back, twisting back, and getting a nice stretch. Bringing the left foot in toward the right buttock. The right foot in toward the right buttock. And stretch back to child's pose. Maybe take a little cat-cow, stretching the back. Inhaling with a flat back and exhaling, rounding the spine, maybe bringing the chin to the chest. Always nice to add in little light stretches in between 3, maybe 6 sets. And here I'm going to rise up and just take a simple twist by placing the right hand to the outside of the left knee, left arm out behind. I'm going to inhale as I reach up, and then exhale and twist to the other side. As we twist, sitting up nice and tall, we relieve pressure in the low back as well as the upper back. And then I'm going to lower down, all the way down to my belly. Do some low back strengtheners here. Lifting the legs and the arms as I inhale. Lifting the left arm and the right leg, and then the right arm and the left leg simultaneously. Maybe open the legs wide as I inhale, and exhale, reach forward. Strengthening the whole back, but really isolating the low back here. It's always good to press back to child's pose and stretch the low back after we do those. I like to call them going from Superman to Aquaman. So one arm and leg, opposite arm and leg at the same time. Really strengthens the low back. And then coming back to seated and opening the legs wide for another twist. So again, we're getting into the middle of the back, the thoracic spine, to create space in our lower back. A little bit of a hip opener as well. Making sure the toes are pointing up. Right hand forward. Left fingertips, I like to keep my spine tall. And again, navel to spine as we breathe and twist, just looking over the shoulder and sitting up tall. And bringing the tension out of the back. Maybe we'll take 6 breaths on each side, switching sides. Really not bringing the hips back as I twist. I'm keeping the hips perfectly squared forward and just looking over the shoulder, keeping the neck long and soft. And taking very deep breaths, sitting up nice and tall. Always important to sit tall when we twist so we can lengthen and open our spines. Maybe bringing the feet together for Baddha Konasana and letting the knees drop open naturally. Our hips are warm and open. A little stretch forward. Tiny, tiny stretch just to open the low back a little bit more, and then bringing the knees together, grabbing our block for support, and coming down to the back to set up same way that we set up when we started. Really, the knees and feet, I like them to be hip distance apart, stretching, hugging one knee in. And then I'm going to take the block and strategically place the block so I can take a supported back bend in between my sacrum and my tailbone. And my sacrum is that big round flat bone just above the tailbone. Find that sweet spot. And remember that you can have the block lower, but we really don't want the block to be so much on the spine. We just want it to open and lengthen the low back. And we can really take our resting pose here, our Shavasana, with the palms facing up. Just lengthening the low back and softening the muscles in the sacroiliac joint. And when you're ready, come off the block, lift the hips, place the block aside, and bringing the knees in to roll to the right side. And again, taking a moment just to check in and see how our body's feeling, and maybe send out a little energy of gratitude and maybe namaste. Just being thankful that we're able to practice self-care.